Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and after a crazy game week 6, it's time to take a look at my early transfer plans ahead of game week 7. Right then, welcome back to another video on my channel. Today we'll be running through my game week 6 performance and my game week 7 transfer plans. Of course, if you did enjoy today's video, I'd massively appreciate it if you could drop a like and hit subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, let's take a quick look back at game week 6. So far, we've still got 2 players yet to play in my team ahead of the Monday night football, with Tarkowski and Ndai yet to play West Ham at home. So fingers crossed for that. In the meantime, though, 67 points looks like enough for a pretty sizable green arrow, in large part thanks to my triple captain on Haaland, but up to around about the top million now from about 1.9 million going into game week 6. I was really battling and torn on whether or not I would hit the wild card or go with triple captain. I did go with triple captain in the end, although I was jealous of a lot of the wild card sides that were being created this week. I was hopeful that a little bit more information and the triple captain would maybe be good enough for me to postpone the wild card for another week or two. As it happened, I got a slice of good fortune on the triple captaincy there. Obviously, 2 last-minute goals for Erling Haaland really bolstered his score. He was going to come away with just an assist at around the 90th minute, but luckily he stayed on the pitch long enough to get those 2 chances at the end. And I do feel very fortunate, very lucky to get those goals, but I will absolutely take it and run. And fingers crossed for all of you who have still got the triple captaincy later on. He's got plenty of other good game weeks that he could easily get the same sort of haul yet again. And I know a lot of people who wildcarded captained him anyway for 32 points. So it's not a nightmare scenario if you didn't triple captain him. I got lucky, I got fortunate, but I will take it and run. And I've got the wildcard in my back pocket for another week. Elsewhere in my side, it was a bit of a non-starter for most of my 11. Obviously, I've got 2 yet to play. I'm very fortunate that Porro did get some time off the bench in game week 6, because otherwise I would have got Esteve for -2, 2 own goals from him. So that would have been devastating to have 2 players on a minus score. Of course, Bruno Fernandes missing the penalty as well, but got lucky with Porro coming off the bench, and I celebrated that substitution like a goal around the 70th minute. Bruno Fernandes, 3 penalties taken so far this season in the Premier League, 2 of them missed. So I do feel maybe a little bit hard done by there. I was expecting more from him. Still, 2 double-digit hauls from him so far, and it could have been 3 or 4 double-digit hauls if he'd scored those penalties. And I will always prefer having the penalty taker in there to have the opportunity of more points in the future. He has been incredibly frustrating though, and my game week score, it could have just looked so much better if he'd actually nailed that penalty. But nevertheless, he didn't. So I can't get carried away with myself there. 2 DEFCON performances from Anderson and Anderson. So both of them getting DEFCON again, just boosting my score just that little bit, extra 4 points from those 2. And elsewhere, it's kind of a non-starter. Sanchez, not a great game from him. Porro came off the bench. João Pedro and Reinders with blanks. So not a very exciting game week outside of Erling Haaland. And now on to Ollie Watkins, who has finally scored in the Premier League this season after 6 attempts, but just in the nick of time as well, because after this game week, we've got a very nice looking fixture in game week 7, which I was very tempted to kind of just ignore Ollie Watkins, maybe wildcard him out either in game week 6 or game week 7. But now he scored against Fulham, and the next week up against Burnley at home looks really good as a fixture. It might be enough to maybe stay my hand and hold on to him for 1 more game week. Fingers crossed he can repeat what he did in game week 6. I'll be more than happy with 1 goal again in game week 7. But overall, 67 points, a good game week. Hopefully it gets better on Monday night with Tarkowski and Ndai yet to play. I think Sarr's going to be blocked on my bench with his 11-pointer against Liverpool, but it's great to see him fit and firing yet again. A really lovely differential that not many people have, and I will benefit from him over the next few weeks, I hope. But in the meantime, let me know how you got on so far in game week 6 with 1 game yet to play, of course. 67 from me, up to 1 million, and I'm happy enough with the start. But let's now move on to game week 7, where there are undoubtedly quite a few things that I need to sort out in my team. Right then, so let's take a look at how my game week 7 team is shaping up so far. I've only got 1 free transfer, 1.9 million in the bank, and a number of players that I would like to be able to get to this week that I just don't think I'll have the opportunity to do so unless I hit that wildcard button. So the wildcard is tempting. I will be doing more research on that and probably putting out a video in the next day or 2 on a wildcard draft for game week 7. So do wait and to check that out in a couple of days' time. In the meantime, though, this video is going to be more focused on my transfer plans if I don't wildcard, which I am really trying not to do at the moment. I think every week that I don't wildcard and kick it down the road, the information that I gather gets more and more powerful and becomes more and more of a difference maker for me. So I'm trying to hold off, but game week 7, there are a number of players that I am missing out on this week that I would love to own, so I am tempted to do so. Let's start off in goal, though. Sanchez and Dubravka, I've got a bit of a decision to make there. Now, Sanchez is, I think, the better keeper in the better team, but he's got Liverpool at home. Now, Liverpool have not been firing on all cylinders, but they're still Liverpool, and I still expect them to score. Dubravka away at Villa, I don't hate it, and I think he'll get some saves. And until today, I might have even had a sneaky gut feeling that Burnley might keep it tight enough to possibly eke out a clean sheet. But having seen Villa maybe turn a corner a little bit against Fulham today, and obviously they won in the midweek as well, I wonder if maybe the chances of a clean sheet have died a little bit with Dubravka this game week. So I'm not loving either of them, but I'm not sure that in itself is worth a wild card over. And there's, of course, one very obvious transfer I could make in my goalkeeper region that would probably beef up my side fairly considerably. We'll move on to that in a moment's time. Moving into the defence, though, 3 defenders that I'm not too bothered owning this game week. Tarkowski at home to Crystal Palace. You know he's going to hit DEFCON more often than not anyway. Anderson is the same, although I don't expect a clean sheet away at Bournemouth, who have been very good in front of goal. And then Porro, I would imagine he comes back in against Leeds, but he's not great on DEFCON. He's lost a lot of their set pieces. I don't love him moving forward as a pick, but it is quite nice having that Spurs defensive coverage because they have been decent at the back. They are pretty well owned as defenders. And I have a pretty strong suspicion that Porro comes back into the starting 11, having missed out in game week 6. I feel like that was maybe just a little bit about fitness and rotation and keeping the squad healthy, and he'll probably come back in. But that is in the back of my mind as a possible concern. I've also got Murillo away at Newcastle on my bench, as well as Esteve against Aston Villa. I don't plan on playing either of them. In my midfield and up front, I think my team looks relatively well set. It's not the exact wild card that I'd be going towards, but a number of these players would survive. Erling Haaland, of course, is a player I'd be including on a wild card. Reinders probably is another player that I'm happy enough with at his price point. Am I expecting a return every week? No. But I think he'll tick along nicely enough, and he's still getting good minutes. Brentford away from home. They organise themselves really well and play very well against Man United, but I still expect City to score a couple of goals in that one. Bruno Fernandes, as frustrating as he is not a sell for me this week ahead of Sunderland at home. Sunderland, by the way, have been fantastic, way beyond what a lot of people thought they would be. I know Sunderland fans were very bullish on them. I think the league is starting to wake up to the quality that they have, and Man United are not going to have it all their own way in that game. But there's never a game week where I'd hate owning Bruno. Obviously, he's had a pretty poor track record penalty-wise this season, but over his career, he is a good penalty taker. He is getting good underlying numbers, and he is hitting DEFCON fairly often. So I think he's worth holding on to for me. Same goes for Undai, as long as he stays out of any trouble, injury or suspension-wise in game week 6. Obviously, I'm recording this before Everton go up against West Ham on Monday. Then I'd love owning him against Palace. And the same goes for Sarr, who's a lovely little differential for me away at Everton now. And no one really owns him. His data is incredible. So I'm very fortunate, very lucky that I've held on to him. Even though the fixtures over the next couple aren't amazing, he's a sort of player that I do have faith could return in any given game week. So I really like owning him. There are obvious omissions, like Semenyo, for instance, in my midfield that I wish I did own, but unfortunately I just don't really see a route to him this week with that midfield 4. There's no player there that I want to sell enough to get Semenyo straight away. Now, in my forward line, I think if you asked me a week ago what my transfer plans for game week 7 were, if I wasn't wildcarding, even with Burnley at home, Watkins to Gyökeres would have been tempting, and it still is tempting. But now, given that Watkins has got his goal in the Premier League, Aston Villa look like they've turned a corner a little bit, and they're going up at home to Burnley, it's going to be pretty tough to sell him. So, with all of that in mind, there are a couple of issues with my side, few players that I'm definitely missing out on. So let's take a look at the different routes that I'm considering most highly ahead of game week 7. Right then, it's early days, of course, but there are 3 main routes that I'm looking at using my 1 free transfer on this game week if I do postpone the wildcard another week. I've got 1.9 million in the bank, so it does give me quite a lot of flexibility to upgrade 1 or 2 positions. I'm reluctant to take a hit, but I'm not completely ruling it out if I think that taking a hit this week can help me postpone the wildcard all the way through to game week 13. So I'll map that out over the week and I'll try and figure out whether maybe being a bit more aggressive for this one game week, taking the 4-point drop, would set me up well enough to help postpone the wildcard up until game week 13. And if I do that, what is the benefit of waiting that long? Am I just kicking it down the road with no real point to doing so? Or should I just use the wildcard this week, get the lot of them, and feel much more comfortable between now and game week 13 and possibly even beyond? Either way, let's take a look at my options with one free transfer. The first option would be, of course, to bring in Gyökeres ahead of West Ham at home. West Ham, under new management, I do expect them to tighten up under Espirito Santo, but are they going to be able to implement his ideas immediately, or is it going to take a week or two? I think Arsenal are going to be able to maybe run West Ham a little bit ragged, and I do expect goals there. And Gyökeres, although he's been pretty poor away from home and against the tougher sides, when he's going up against the weaker sides, he is a bit of a flat track bully. He does get the odd opportunity, and West Ham at home does seem like a good enough fixture to be targeting him. So as disappointing as he has been in specific weeks, in other weeks when he's got a bit more joy, he's been more than good enough to own for 9 million. Now, I've got Watkins on here as a potential sell, but having seen his performance today and the fact he's finally got the goal, Burnley next up, I think it's just a player I want to hold on to as a bit of a differential. So it's most likely going to be João Pedro out if I do sell any striker. Now, João Pedro is very well owned, so it would be going against the crowd. It's a tough fixture against Liverpool, but do I think that Liverpool could concede against Chelsea? Absolutely. And João Pedro is always quite likely to get their goals. So even that has its risk. I'm not loving that sell. I think if I committed to a wildcard in game week 8, where I could just bring João Pedro straight back in, this move becomes a little bit more likely. But if I'm looking at maybe postponing the wildcard a few game weeks, selling João Pedro seems like a pretty poor decision, considering game week 8 onwards, Chelsea's fixtures are very, very good. So this one move in particular would probably only be if I committed to wildcarding in game week 8, so I could bring João Pedro straight back in. It would give me a game week 7 forward line, front three of Haaland against Brentford, Gyökeres at home to West Ham, and Watkins at home to Burnley, which sounds pretty good to me. But again, that's very 1 week focused. And if I am postponing the wild card, I don't really want to be selling João Pedro. Option number 2 is probably my most likely at time of recording. It would be to sell Murillo to upgrade my defence. There are 3 good options. I do quite like Dan Burn, considering Newcastle's defence has been very miserly so far. But I think the DEFCON potential of Senesi maybe slightly outweighs Dan Burn anyway. And then I think, again, even more so than Senesi, I really do want that Arsenal clean sheet locked in ahead of game week 7 and beyond. So I think looking at other people's squads, looking at the fixtures that Arsenal have got, and looking at their defensive data, going into game week 7 and beyond without any Arsenal defensive coverage seems really dangerous to me. So again, considering what we just saw in game week 6 with the last minute Gabriel goal, we know he's got set piece threat. West Ham have been awful defensively from set pieces, so he could easily do it again. He's got DEFCON a couple of times now. He's obviously playing in the best defense, or one of the best defenses in the league, and I can get there with 1 free transfer. So I would love to own Senesi. I'd also really like some Newcastle defensive coverage, but I think the priority out of those 3 is getting the Arsenal player and getting Gabriel. So out of the 3, Gabriel would be the one, but it's not necessarily the transfer I need to make this week. I've already shown you my defense. It would be Anderson starting away at Bournemouth. I'm not expecting a clean sheet, but I am expecting DEFCON from him. So if I made this move, it would probably be Gabriel coming into my starting lineup alongside Porro, probably alongside Tarkowski as well. Anderson drops to my bench. Is that enough upside? Maybe, quite possibly, but maybe there's more upside in me getting rid of Sanchez in goal, upgrading to Raya, where there is a good chance of a clean sheet, as opposed to Sanchez or Dubravka, where I think the odds are pretty low of getting anything. So I also really like making the keeper move this week. I also don't hate taking the hit to just sort both of those positions out immediately, maybe even go double Arsenal defence straight away and give myself a little bit of an aggressive couple of moves for a hit, but it might help me postpone the wild card, especially because I do really want double Arsenal defence as soon as possible. And if the only way I can do so is by taking the -4 this week, but it helps me postpone the wildcard all the way through to game week 13, might be worth doing. So I think at time of recording, most likely transfer is Murillo to Gabriel, but I do really want Senesi. If I wildcarded, I could get both of them. I do want Gyökeres for this next run. Probably can't get both. And Raya as well seems like a good buy. So a lot of these players would be in on a wildcard. It's tempting to go for a lot of them, but I don't think I'm that badly set up ahead of game week 6. Get ahead of game week 7. Sorry. If I go back to my game week 7 side here, if I made that Gabriel switch, then Anderson drops to my bench. That's the Anderson for Fulham. Of course, Anderson, Nottingham Forest is already on my bench. Murillo obviously subbed out for Gabriel. Gabriel starting in 11. Anderson onto my bench. And overall, I think I'm fairly well covered. I'm not loving my goalkeeper situation, but at least I've got one Arsenal defender. I've got good clean sheet odds for Tarkowski and Porro, and Tarkowski's good on the DEFCON. In my midfield and up front, I'm pretty happy with a lot of them. And although João Pedro doesn't look great for this week, he's so highly owned that I don't mind just owning him anyway. And that probably leaves me with a head-to-head versus the crowd of Watkins at home to Burnley versus the well-owned and probably well-bought Gyökeres at home to West Ham. And although I think Gyökeres is a great pick, I think between the two, there's not much separating them. So I'm hoping that Watkins gives me enough of an edge over Gyökeres owners that I can postpone that move and maybe look at doing that in a week or two's time. But the other alternative there is to sell João Pedro, get in Gyökeres, have all three, Haaland, Watkins and Gyökeres for the week, and then maybe wildcard in game week 8 so I can get back to João Pedro immediately because I don't want him sold for the long term. So my transfer plan currently is Gabriel in. I might even make that move fairly early and then make sure that I'm not worried about price changes throughout the week. And because I've got the wild card up my sleeve, if anything happens midweek, I can just hit the wild card because I'm fairly tempted to do so anyway. And then I don't need to worry about having had that early move made. Let me know what your early transfer plans are in the comments below. Let me know what you think of my side going into game week 7 and whether or not you think a wild card might be on the cards for me. I think it's in the realms of possibility, but I am trying to postpone it as best as I can. But either way, I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you next time as we probably have a look at what a wildcard side looks like ahead of game week 7.